What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Celtic Clydesdale show. I'm Jim and I am the Celtic Clydesdale. Today's episode, as you can see by my new backdrop, is going to be about bicycles. Particularly what I'm going to do is discuss the various parts of what make up a bicycle, mechanically speaking. I'll discuss things like the derailleurs, the stem, the steering tube, the seat post, the saddle, etc. And then what I'm going to do is give you a little comparison between a triathlon bike like you see behind me and a road bike. Before I get started, I want to say that the bike you see behind me, it's not mine. I got it on loan from a buddy of mine. I don't personally own a triathlon bike, but my buddy does, and I wanted to have one of each to show the differences. So that's what you're seeing behind me. It's my buddy's tri bike. Later in the video, you're going to see my bike, so I could show you a road bike, and then of course the tri bike to show you that. So let's get into this. All right, so here we are. We got the tri bike up first, and we're just going to start at the top and we'll work our way down and forward, and we'll discuss the different parts of the bike. All right, so starting up top, you got the saddle. Also call it the seat. It's it's where you put your butt, and without that you'd have to stand up, and while you're riding the entire time you get pretty tired really quick. All right, moving our way down, right below that you've got the seat post right here. Now you'll notice on the tri bike, the seat post is kind of wide here along this cross section, and you can't see it really in the video, but it's pretty narrow right here. All right, now this is an aero seat post. This is on a tri bike, which is all about aerodynamics. All right, so what you got is this narrow, wide seat post that's totally and completely designed for cutting the air and being as aerodynamic as possible. All right, and now seat post comes into the seat tube, which will be this right here. It's kind of hard to see with a tri bike, but you got the seat tube, and then on the tri bike it flares out here, again for aerodynamic purposes. All right, so attached at the top upper portion of the seat tube you've got the seat stays on either side, and then down at the bottom of the seat tube you've got the bottom bracket at the very bottom, which is sort of difficult to see with the crankset in the way, but you got the bottom bracket, which is actually where the crankset goes through to go through either side, right? And then you've got the chain stays, which as they're called that because they run parallel with the chain. All right, we are looking at the drive side of the bike, so you've also got your crankset. Of course, here you've got the drive side crank is connected to your chain rings. In this case, you got two chain rings on the bike. That's pretty much the standard with triathlon bikes and road bikes these days. Now with mountain bikes, you're going to typically, these days, you're going to end up with a fairly small single chain ring up front. And then of course you move out back, you got the chain comes out. You've got your rear cassette on the back wheel. The cassette is going to have anywhere from 5 sprockets all the way up to 12 sprockets they're getting into these days. Right now on most road bikes and tri bikes, the standard is 11. I know on my bike, which is off screen right now, but I'll bring it in a little bit, it's got 9 sprockets on the rear cassette. All right, and it's just to give you a wider range of gears. All right, so we'll go ahead and talk about the drivetrain. We already discussed the chain. We discussed your crankset with your chain rings. We discussed the cassette. All right, now you've got your rear derailleur, which is basically what shifts your rear gears. All right, and that's typically operated with, in this case, the shifter out here on the aero bar on the right side, and then you've got your front derailleur, which shifts back and forth between your chain rings up front. I'll point out, like I mentioned earlier, a mountain bike has usually got one small single chain ring. Mountain bikes these days are all about torque, all right? You'll end up with a pretty small front chain ring, and out back your sprockets will go down to a really small sprocket to give you a bit of speed, all the way up to something that's actually bigger than the front chain ring, which will be all about torque and climbing. All right, now on tri bikes and road bikes, you get the two of them because you'll have your smaller chain ring, which is going to be about developing torque, and you're going to have your bigger chain ring. Your big chain ring is going to be all about speed. Now, I can tell you, on my bike, I've actually got 3 chain rings, which has gone out of style these days, but I rarely use the 2 smaller chain rings. In fact, I use them so little that my front derailleur, when it broke, I just took it off, and I don't have a cable running through there, and I don't have the derailleur in place. Eventually I'll probably get it fixed, you know, who knows. Like I said, I'm always on the big ring. I'm all about speed. I live in Northeast North Carolina. It's flat, and what little hills we do have, I can climb fairly well, going a low gear out back and staying on my big chain ring. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. All right, forward of the seat tube, we've got the top tube, which is just what it sounds like. It's the tube that's on top. All right, now you'll notice this one is straight, and if you grew up in the 80s, you know, or you're of a certain age, you'll remember some of the bikes where your top tube followed the down tube quite a bit and then came into the seat tube, so you had this wide open gap in this area here. All right, now that stems from back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when everybody and their grandmother rode bikes. The top tube came down and across to allow women's dresses to clear through there and not get in the way. All right, so I already mentioned your down tube and your top tube coming up forward. Now it's hard to see with the tri bike, but you've got your steering tube going through here. All right, it connects to the front fork. Notice again, you got this pretty wide profile here, but on this profile, it's really narrow. Again, that's purely for aerodynamics. Now, if we move back up at the top of the steering tube, we've got the stem. All right, which is, the stem is just nothing more than a way to attach your cockpit, your handlebars, to the steering tube. All right, now in this case, this is an aero cockpit, so what you have is sort of a wing-shaped bar top that's really not designed to be ridden on. You'll notice it's got elbow pads here that are fixed in place. Those don't go anywhere. And then you got what I call the horns, which is basically where you do your, you know, your nimble steering and whatnot, or taking corners and all that. And then you got the aero bars, which is pretty much where you spend the majority of your time when you're on a tri bike. And then you got your shifters at the end. Now on a tri bike, like I said, shifters are on your aero bars, and your brakes are out here on the horns. Of course, you got front brake over on the left, right brake over here. Right side shifts the rear derailleur, left side shifts the front derailleur. Brakes. Let's talk about brakes, which I kind of glanced over. You really can't see it so well from this angle, but tucked in between the seat tube and the wheel on most tri bikes is the rear brake. All right, it sits down low. It's behind the butt up between the down tube and the seat tube, right, and your bottom bracket, so that all of this mass here shields that brake from any incoming airflow. All right, again, aerodynamics. Now, unfortunately, you can't do such things with the front brakes, so they're right there, front brakes. Now, these are what we call rim brakes. They stop the bike by literally squeezing on the rim and slowing you down. Now, you can get a little bit more aero and get disc brakes, but it also drives up the cost of your bike. So those are the parts of the bike. So let me pull my bike in and I'll show you the difference between a road bike and a triathlon bike. All right, so now I got my bike here, and you'll notice that the forks on my bike are also sort of shaped for aero, and you'll see a lot better that you've got the steering tube up here, and I didn't mention it on the tri bike because it's hard to see, but you've got the head tube. All right, and now also on my bike you'll notice that the stem is a lot more pronounced. All right, and in my case the stem actually gives me a little bit of reach because it's got this length here that moves the cockpit a little bit out. All right, and that's just has the end result of sort of making the bike a little bit longer, and that way it fits me a little bit better. And you'll notice I also have an aero bar set up on mine. It's basically an aero bar that clips to my handlebars, which in this case I've got drop bars. This is a slightly less aggressive racing bar. It's definitely more aggressive than like a touring drop bars, way more aggressive than flat bars. But this bike from the get-go was really designed, my bike specifically was designed to blend between being a road bike for everyday use or touring use, or doing like criteriums, and also being able to be used in a triathlon. So I've got my elbow pads, they flip up and out of the way so you can ride on top of the bars, and then of course the aero bar is out in the front. Now in the case of my bike, my shifters and my brake levers are fairly integral, so that I don't really, when I want to shift or brake, I don't have to move my hands from, you know, whatever position. All right, now with these drop bars, you've got a choice of 3 riding positions. You've got in the drops, which is an aggressive position that's really for going, you know, fast and getting as aerodynamic as you can. You've got up top, which is a relaxed riding position, and then you got what they call on the hoods, which is, you know, it's a fairly relaxed, but it's like a happy medium between your relaxed position and your aggressive position. All right, and it's actually where quite a lot of racers will spend their time, because it's low enough that they're aerodynamic, but it's high enough that they're kind of relaxed a little bit, and then they'll hit the drops when they're on a sprint or whatnot. So that's the biggest difference between the tri bike. You'll also notice that my bike, my down tube is fairly well shaped for aerodynamics, but you'll notice my seat tube is round. All right, that's, again, it's supposed to be a road bike, so they tried to put some aerodynamic stuff in there, but at the same time they kept it sort of road bike worthy. So that's it in a nutshell. Now you know the difference between a road bike, a triathlon bike, and you know the various parts of the bike. So let's go ahead and close this thing out. All right, so there you have it. You now know various parts of a bicycle, and you know the difference between a triathlon bike and a road bike. So if you liked anything that I talked about today, and you found it educational, entertaining, any of that good stuff, give me a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel or you just haven't done so yet, please go ahead and subscribe, and then of course hit the notification bell so that you can keep up to date when I post future videos. All right, so yeah, hit me up in the comments if you liked what you heard and you want to discuss anything, or you know, you got some pointers to give to me, or even discuss if you've got some ideas for some parts on the bike that I missed. All right, hey, just interact with me. That'll be great. So until next time, keep on keeping on.